I'm curious, what did your parents do for a living? And reflecting on that, maybe how did that impact some of the decisions you made in your career?
Yeah, so both my parents are architects, which is, I guess, one from one hand very interesting and sensible, and from another hand kind of like incongruent with the path that me and my brother took, where both my parents were like, maybe don't do architecture. It's a tough industry. They always used to joke that, they're the last to get paid in a good economy and the first to get let go in a bad economy. So it's
Um,
like but they loved it, right? And especially my mom, who was very much like came from the world of fine arts and had her MFA, like that was just, I think, a helpful foundation for me from more of like a design and aesthetic standpoint, that I was just surrounded by like Ava Hesse sculpting books and, Mies van der Rohe architecture books from a young age. So definitely had a huge influence, but maybe not necessarily something that I appreciated from a young age. I think it's something that maybe kind of planted a seed that sprouted later in life as I got older, as it kind of did for my brother as well. So um, I think there's kind of two sides to that are most influential. One is the appreciation for the arts, and the other is just kind of the hustle. And my mom in particular, she worked in both kind of commercial and residential architecture, but mostly in commercial. But she ended up going to launch her own architecture firm. So I think also kind of witnessing the entrepreneurial spirit firsthand had a huge influence on me. But both my parents' story is just, it's, kind of, it's one of these ones that, I'm not going to say it's akin to the whole pursuit of happiness story of kind of just like, but there's just that journey of, figuring things out, the grit that it takes, the perseverance, and also um, always kind of having a eye or lens towards like what they wanted long term in terms of the stability that they were looking for. So, my mom has all sorts of stories of like literally doing an elevator pitch, trying to pitch to get her first job in San Francisco when she was there at an architecture firm, and riding the elevator, and they weren't listening to her while she had her sketches in her kind of tote bag with her, and she went downstairs frustrated to the cafe below the building, and the barista saw her kind of, dejected and was like, what's wrong? And she was like, I keep trying to get to know somebody at this firm to get a job there. And somebody said that the partner sits here every day and has a soup in that corner seat. I'll point him out to you when he comes down. And she sat there and waited, and the barista pointed him out, and she went there and rolled out her sketches and showed him, and that's how she got her first job. So there's, that side of it. And then there's the other side, which is just, I say design, but it's really more so like attention to detail. Like even when we would walk into lobbies, when I was visiting New York when I was a kid, my mom would like point out, like, do you notice how like the marble grain with the sculpture, how all of that creates momentum? Like you can have signs that say elevator banks this way, but you can also create momentum or psychological understanding of how to move through a space just by how you decorate or the decorative elements on how you think through the interior design or any design. So I think those kind of two sides of the coin are what really influenced me from a young age from my parents' story.
that's really cool. Did you grow up here or in Iran?
I grew up here. I grew up just outside of DC in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your parents meet in university, like since they were both architects?
Yeah, yeah. So they kind of knew each other back in Iran, and then they both came to the US where my parents did their masters. So kind of around that 1974 to 1978 time. But um, it was, a big part of like being part of like Persian culture. It was definitely a big part of the upbringing as well. But I think specifically just being in the arts was um yeah, just something that I came to really fall in love with, especially I think when I got older. I ended up, going into working in finance, but yeah, the more I did that, the more I think I just gravitated back to the, I guess, is it the right brain?
Yeah,
But like right side of my brain.
totally.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
do you like, was their move from overseas, was it easy? What, like, do they share that? Like, was it hard? What was it like?
No, it's yeah. I mean, I know that they take a lot of pride in how they figure things out. So they never
Yeah.
want to portray anything in, the trials and tribulations of trying to like reestablish yourself and find a new home. I think that the way that they tell those stories was like that's just what you did. Like you just had to figure it out. But like, I mean, think about moving to any country where you're still kind of getting acclimated with the language. You're trying to, take care of yourself, whether that's finishing education, getting a job, taking care of family, like all of the things that they had to juggle. It honestly puts everything into perspective that I deal with now. As hard as things might be in the entrepreneurial journey, like hearing what they went through um, was in a way like you don't want to discredit or marginalize your own challenges that you have to deal with, but it put everything into perspective for me, so it just makes it a little bit easier to like not make mountains out of molehills or just put into perspective what other people have to go through.
Yeah, I love that. I think our parents probably have similar stories. I was talking to my mom the other day, and I never asked this to her, but I said, "Did you speak English when you moved here?" And she's like,
Did she?
"No, she didn't." They taught like a different type of class, language class, in school, and it was like when the Russians invaded, like they basically left, so it was like 79 ish. But I just assumed she did. I just assumed she, because my dad always had broken
Is it
English.
from Afghanistan or was it
Yeah,
from, yeah, okay,
yeah,
got it.
yeah. They were in Kabul at the time, and so I just assumed she, because her English is so good,
Yeah.
and they opened up. So my dad opened up like a fried chicken restaurant in New York, in like Harlem and in like the worst areas, right? Harlem and Yonkers
Oh,
at the
so they
time.
must have stories.
Oh yeah, there's a picture. I recently posted it, and it's like it's a Polaroid, and I'm sitting there by like the cash register, and my parents have their like fast food shirts on. But she told me that was the job that helped her, and then she was like a manager. Well, first not a manager, but became a manager like a fast food place in New Jersey, and that's where she also learned to speak and those things. And so I think there's those things that it's so easy to take for granted. But to your point, like the problems that we have compared to our parents moving to a brand new country, and getting acclimated. It's so easy for me to forget. But yeah, definitely, you're right. It definitely puts it into perspective.
Yeah, like it breeds a sense of like resilience, I think, through everything that you deal with. Like even with my parents, like they were very, very supportive, but they were also like they they had very high expectations. So there was very little like participation trophy energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
was, the goalpost always felt like it was moving further out. And the one thing that, as much as at times that may have been frustrating, I felt like, they were always kind of in the ring with me. Like the expectation was always like, we're gonna, if you need to work on this, then like we're gonna figure this out together, or like don't get pressured. Whether that was like academics, playing an instrument, like sports, what have you, like they were trying to help be in the process with me, even if it's like they're not out in the field with me. Like that's,
That's pretty cool.
like, okay, well, what do you need to get better? Like, don't, instead of getting frustrated with it, like just try and problem solve around it, which is, I think, really important when you're building anything, is almost this mentality that I've been talking with a few friends about recently, is that like I feel like the mentality is not that you need to have everything solved, but the mentality is that everything is solvable. Like if you don't approach things with that kind of headspace when you're trying to build anything, like especially in the early days, there's just these tectonic plates shifting underneath you. Like you, it's almost like it's equal parts confidence and humility, right? Like I don't know, I know I'm not going to know everything, but I'm going to be able to figure this out. And I felt like I had that instilled in me from a young age. It's like, okay, you're frustrated. What are the steps? Like break it down. What do you need to do to get better?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, to your point, if you're not in that headspace that it's solvable, then you've already unconsciously decided that you're not going to figure it
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Interesting. What did you study in school?
So, for undergrad, I studied finance, IT, and Chinese. Yeah. Um,
I think that's the first time I heard
was
that mix before.
yeah, 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 yeah. And it was, the Chinese one was interesting because it was like I was studying Chinese since I think it was like 10 or 11 is when I started that. So it was Farsi school Saturdays, Chinese school Sundays, and then, Spanish classes intermixed with like normal curriculum Monday to Friday. So it's a jumble of languages up here. So it's a miracle if I'm finishing a sentence in any language at this point.
Wow. So I remember that too. So did you go to like a regular public school or were you homeschooled
Yeah.
or
Yeah, regular public
okay.
school, Northern Virginia. Yeah.
But then you
But
were
the like
learning
Chinese
Chinese on
classes,
Sundays?
yeah, yeah, it was hilarious. I would be like, if when I was like 10 or 11 or whatever it was, I would be in this classroom. I still remember it's like Annandale High School. It wasn't my high school. It was like we'd
Oh.
drive out to this one and you'd sit in these chairs. They would actually swap out the desks. So there was these tiny desks because all the other kids, I was the only non-Chinese kid. And then they're all like 3 or 4 years old. And even though like 10 or 11 is like still pretty young, you're like twice the size of these kids. And I'm
Oh.
like squeezing into this little desk. So I'm like learning like hello, my name is. And I'm just like, this is just ridiculous. But no, I mean, even that, like I never weirdly, up until I think I was like 18, I never really thought I would be fluent in Chinese. And I think it was only until I started college and I started taking it a lot more seriously, I realized I had a huge leg up on everyone because my ear was already used to the language.
Wow. Have you ever
Yeah.
traveled to like Shenzhen for work? Or
Oh, yeah,
I imagine.
regularly. Yeah.
Okay.
I did an exchange program there. I ended up working in China at PwC
Oh,
for the summer internship. Yeah. Um, which was funny because when I got the job, they're like, don't worry, it's mostly English. You're barely gonna have to do Chinese. We actually need somebody in the consulting department that speaks English. There was not a word of English said that entire summer. Like the first brief I got, just a full print page in Chinese characters. I was like, all right, figure
wow.
this out.
Did your brother do the same or he opted out of the language?
Of Chinese
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Did he go with you or is he
uh
what's the age gap?
no. My brother's 4 years older. No, he didn't. He
Okay.
did Farsi school with me, but he didn't do any of the language stuff. I think I expressed some interest. And again, it goes back to my parents. Like, if I express interest in anything, they're like, okay, do it seriously. Like, let's take this
Oh,
forward. So, like, I think there was just like a morsel of interest. And my parents were like, all right, let's run with this. I think it was almost this mentality of experimentation. Like, he'll find out what he doesn't like before he finds out what he does like. So, anything that he expresses an interest in, let's put him in and let's see what sticks.
so you never felt like it was forced.
No, no, it
Interesting.
was
Okay.
highly encouraged. But at the end of the day, like even like when I did things like I was, doing drumline at a point, and I was like, I told my mom that I was like, I think I'm done with this, and she was like, that's fine. If it's not something that you're passionate about, that's okay. It's just like there wasn't an option to do nothing. That was
Yeah.
not like there was no just like sitting at home, but it was like you have to get outside, you have to do things, you have to be active, which I'm always curious, like what's it like now for kids growing up? Because I'm so curious with just all of the technology stuff that gets integrated in. Like I hear more and more about how they're not socializing and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's just it was so integral into my upbringing. What I'm starting to wonder was I like one of the last two or three generations where like that was a big part of the upbringing and now it's just all digital.
Maybe. Yeah. Our kids are homeschooled, but my wife like does like it's not like they're homeschooled and they're on a computer.
Yeah.
There's no
What are their
PlayStation,
ages?
8 and 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So it
They're getting to
is,
that age where like they start to do like team sports or stuff like that, or
yeah.
like
They play like my son plays drums.
mm,
His lessons are Mondays. My daughter's same time around the same time she plays violin. Um, and it's that conversation of like, do you want to
yeah,
continue playing it? Do you
right,
want to try
right.
the piano? And she takes like a sewing.
How do you make the call on like how far to push that? And like in terms of like I don't want them to like throw in the towel too early, but I want them to be actually passionate about what they do.
Yeah, I
Like,
think it's a good question. So like Taekwondo is a good example because you make a commitment or like we do financially for at least a year. And my
yeah,
daughter did it and then she got like she really you can observe and tell you could just tell she wasn't into it. And so we had to have this conversation at at the time she's like 8 or something. And so we're having this conversation with her. And so she opts out and we basically gave the credits left. We just like transfer it to my son. Time went by
right.
and she would go back to the class and watch. And she got like re-interested in it. And so we said, okay, well, the interesting thing is if you start now, you guys will be at the same belt level. And so you can
Mm,
take the same class. I thought that was like the coolest thing. A brother and sister can go to the same
yeah.
Taekwondo class. And then we had the conversation and said, okay, if you want to do it, you have to commit for 12 months. There's no opting out. And if that's something you want to do.
Mm,
And so I think that's one thing. And then on the flip side, I recently coached my son's baseball team. It was crazy. I learned a lot. It was fun.
Yeah. Because you
Brought
play
us
baseball, right? Yeah.
I played baseball. I played baseball,
Yeah.
but dude, I was not like teaching it and playing is two different things. I didn't know.
Totally different. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing, but I took like some online coaching classes, like just on my dime, and it was I was a little surprised because I thought it was just going to be like drills that you would be doing, but it was sort of the mental aspect of it and like really making sure that you've got like the kids, um, really prioritizing like that. This most of your
Yeah.
not saying that you guys are not going to make the major leagues, but like really making sure that like we're raising major league humans versus just wins and losses. And so it was a lot about the training was about like the psychology of little league. And then I thought to myself, well, like, okay, well, I just need to learn the drills at this. Why don't I just do it rather than assist? And so I coached his team. And my son, I would say, is like he'll play, but if we get there early, which you have to as a coach to set up, he's more interested in catching bugs than he is practicing early. And I noticed
Okay.
that. So he'll play. He played the season, but then they have like fall ball right afterwards. Like, hey, it's Sundays or whatever. And he's like,
Yeah.
nah. And my wife was like, let's not force him if he doesn't want to do it. And so will
Sure.
he play baseball next year? Probably. Does he want to do the extracurricular stuff in between? I don't think so. And so, she reminds me like, this is like, it's got to be what he wants to do, not like what you want him to
Yeah.
do. So I think there's like a delicate balance of like, making a commitment at a young age with something I think is kind of important,
Yeah.
at the same time. But to your point,
Yeah.
if he
But like
wants,
supporting the exploration process too, like let them figure out what they like.
if he says he doesn't want to play baseball next year and he wants to play soccer, I think we nurture that and support it. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was literally only one thing that my mom forced me to do. She said, just do it for one season. And if you hate it, you don't have to keep doing it. Just do it for one season. And it was rowing. And I was like, I am
Ooh.
a short, stocky guy. I'm perfectly built for wrestling, is why I was captain of my wrestling team. I'm like, I'm purpose built for this sport. Rowing could not be more antithetical to my build.
What did you think?
And
Did you like it?
it was the best experience ever. I was so glad. She loves this sport. She likes to be by the water. So there was like a reservoir, the Occoquan Reservoir near us, and that's where they rode. And she was like, I just think it would be great to be outside. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. I became incredibly close still to this day with the guys in our boat. We became state champs. You build this bond.
Wow.
Like also I later found out that the job I got in my first job in investment banking out of college, they loved the fact that I rode because there's this whole like moving in unison, like being in lockstep with each other. And frankly, also just like the grit again that it takes to work through that sport. It's like you're, 800 meters into a race and all your blisters have ripped open and you're bleeding down the oar and you still got 1,200 meters to go. You're like blacking out from the pain, but you just have to stay in lockstep with your team. Otherwise the boat's going to go sideways or flip. Like there was all sorts of like teamwork and leadership elements tied to that I think you don't realize at the time how formative it is, but it's incredibly valuable. And then also it's just such a nice change of pace. Like there's a lot of like brutality in wrestling. I think there's also still a lot of learnings through the experience of what you go through, but I was so glad. And all she said was do it for a season, and if you hate it, you don't have to keep doing it. But it was one of the best experiences, not just athletically, but personally, it was socially for me. It was the friends I made on the boat.
That's really
I mean,
cool.
there's that whole book,
Yeah.
Boys in the Boat.
I
I don't know if
haven't
you
read
read
it.
that.
It was highly
Yeah.
recommended to me by somebody I respect. Um, yeah, I have not read it, but have you read it? Is it good?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, having wrote and then also reading that book and then like all the little nuances, like how they tried to tip the scales, they tried to make the American team lose by putting them at the side of the water that has a higher current. Like
Oh.
I know like when you get like hit with that and you're like we're experiencing drag and in the center of the river, like you're not going to hit it as much as you are on the banks, or like there was something about how they situated the boats. And it's like having been in all of those situations, I mean, we had one race, we were the first race of the day, and we're just sitting out on the launch waiting to start, and the refs aren't there, and it's just hailing. There was, I think, seven of the like 24 guys in the race got hypothermia as we were waiting out there. And I just remember one of my buddies in front of me, Brock, just wouldn't shake. Like he wouldn't be shaking. And he's like, I
Oh,
don't want to show pain. And I was like, okay, man. Like I didn't even know that that's something you can physically control. I thought it's just like an automatic response to the cold, but he just like wouldn't move. And we ended up doing the race, and like a bunch of people got rushed to the hospital, and you're like literally just standing out there waiting at the launch for somebody to come. But anyways, it's just a wild sport. I love that book. And then they tell the backstories of every person. You just have basically a bunch of farm boys that end up
wow.
making the Olympic boat. Um, you know, during I think it was the Berlin Olympics, right? Like post World War II or during World War II.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read it, but
Yeah.
I'll definitely check it out. It's always one every time I see it, I'm like, oh, I know like this guy that again, I highly respect him too.
Yeah.
Recommended it. I'll
It's
definitely
just
check
like
that
an
out.
underdog, a great underdog story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, I like that, you know, baseball. I think every sport has like the sort of upside and sort of different things that it teaches you. With baseball, there's a lot of failure. I mean, you're failing most of the time.
Yeah.
And so it is, how do you react to that, especially as a kid? Um, and so, yeah, but something somebody said to me, it was a former NFL quarterback said to me not long ago that if you were to give parents advice about, like, he obviously played at a high level, he got injured. Do you follow football a
Not
little bit?
super closely,
Okay. He
but
was the
who is
quarterback
this?
of the Redskins, RG3, Robert Griffin the third.
Oh yeah, of
So
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
his
remember.
story is,
Yeah.
yeah, he is promising career and then he gets injured. And he basically said that if you pressure your kids to play like football all the time, all year round, you just burn them out of it. So to your point of like trying new things and switching sports, that was his piece of advice. And his kids were also in Taekwondo actually. And he's like, yeah, like let them try different things and just don't burn them out in one sport just because. And I think a lot, as you probably see in, especially in baseball, like when you go to games for youth, a lot of the parents that are yelling from the stands are trying to like relive their childhoods, through their
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah. Oh my
Uh,
God, wrestling. It's
it's
wild,
similar. Did you
especially
wrestle in school?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I did wrestling all 4 years. Had a great coach the first 2 years, had a really, really terrible coach the last 2 years, which again, like was a great showcasing or case study in leadership and like what that looks like. Because in either situation, you're going through hell. But
What
yeah,
was good about the good one, and what was bad about the bad one? Would you say if you just had to point like
I
a
mean,
thing?
the bad one, I think, I don't know if it was also just like a chip on his shoulder, but he, I think, almost in like a sadistic manner, enjoyed too much like the suffering portion of it. So, like, if we're starving ourselves, it's one thing to like push your team. Like,
Yep.
we had a coach who would push us hard. And then he would invite back like the old captains who are great. And so they'd bring these guys that would just like, one, they were all still in amazing shape. And two, they just knew exactly what the limit was on how far they can push you. And then this other guy that came in, like he had no idea what the limit was. And then, like, as we're starving, we haven't eaten for 3 days. He's eating a brownie in front of us and laughing about it. And you're like, bro, that's not
Wow.
funny. Like, that's not like I understand why you think that's funny because you're in your seat, but like, one, you have very poor EQ. Two, what I think is more disappointing in that sense is that you're actually not understanding how to get the best out of your team. Like, do you actually want to win? Because now we have no connection to you. We've lost our connective tissue and we don't feel as motivated and excited to move as a unit together because you don't understand the strength of the unity. Like, wrestling is an individual sport. When you step out on the mat, everything that happens before that is a team sport. You cut
Mm.
weight together, you struggle together, like you work out together. Like, everything about it, like training, is very much a team sport. And so when you step out into the mat, like that's your moment to shine. But like if you're not putting in the work off the mat, or I should say, I mean you're still on the mat, but like outside of like competition, if you're not putting in the work, you're never gonna be great. And so I was lucky that I had a great coach before him. But yeah, I mean, it was brutal in terms of what we went through, but it just clicked for me. Like I just loved it. Like there was this Nova Classics. It's, I was supposed to win the thing for my weight class and I lost the very first match. I never forgot it. And like it's I still remember this one because my my parents always remind me of it too, but I had such a chip on my shoulder. Like I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just went into the stands, but it was a 2 and out competition. So you lose one round, you're not done out of the competition, but you do get relegated to like the loser bracket. And so I went in and I just went on a tear for the next, like, I think it was like 12 matches. I just destroyed everybody until I got back to meet the same guy that I lost to at the beginning for the third place spot. So you're not in contention for first or second anymore. So I just had to go on like a tear
Did you beat the guy the
until,
second time or
and then
no?
I beat him the second time around. I was like, I'm gonna kill him. Like, and
Yeah.
I just had something, I had something to prove, but it's also the competitive spirit of it. It just clicked with me.
Yeah.
Like wrestling just clicked with me. It felt natural to me.
Why did you think
And
you lost the first round with him? Was it more like you were overthinking it, or was he that good?
I think I think that I don't think it was underestimated. I think that's actually interesting. I never actually analyzed why I lost. I definitely was like overly cerebral at times around like what to do in a moment as opposed to just reacting because it is much more chess than you think in wrestling. So like a lot of times people think it's just like brute force wins. It's like I don't know if you've done this sport enough, but you'll quickly find like sometimes the skinny lanky person, if they understand momentum and movement, like they will destroy you. But like that's because a really strong person might try and push you in this direction. Let's say like they're trying to push you clockwise. You can resist getting pushed clockwise, or alternatively, you can roll with the person, like use their own
Mm.
momentum against them and be like, I'm actually, instead of trying to resist this moment, I'm going to lean into it and actually just use his own force and strength against him and keep the roll going until I'm in a more dominant position and just like understanding that stuff. But yeah, I may have overthought in the moment, but I honestly I couldn't tell you at this point. I never actually did like a post mortem on the match to
Yeah.
think about it.
It's
Yeah,
like Patrick Mahomes is kind of famous for saying like he just needs to get like his first hit of the season and then he's like rolling, like sometimes I feel
yeah.
like sometimes you to your point, like maybe we overthink it in the beginning and maybe it's a good thing. It's interesting,
Like in
interesting
basketball
lesson.
too, they talk about that too, right? Like they say like you get into like a flow state where like you are thinking and you're picking up on all these little details, but you're not even realizing you're picking up on it. It's happening so intuitively. Like it's like eustress and distress. Like distress is bad, but eustress is
You
like
trust, yeah.
tunnel vision. Like I'm so focused, I'm so dialed in. Like I understand exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly where my footing is and everything.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I watched pro wrestling as a kid, but I was like, watching the Iron Sheik and Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, Hulk Hogan, Triple
Yeah,
H.
that was just my childhood right there. Okay, so how would you describe your career before starting Terra Cafe?
Um, yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's probably a triangulation of like finance, business, I mean, hardware, and design. It really is a mixed bag because I was always doing entrepreneurial things. Um, but I seldom define my career before starting Terra Cafe within the entrepreneurial ventures I pursued because maybe it's, none of them were like venture backed businesses or maybe none of them really got to a level of scale, but like I started my first company when I was 16, which was a ultimate frisbee summer camp in my just local regional area. And then when I was 18 or 19, I believe I tried to start a wind farm in the Midwest, but surprise, surprise, nobody wanted to give a 10-year-old or sorry, an 18-year-old $10 million to buy three megawatt turbines. So that wasn't successful.
Was that your first job, the Ultimate Frisbee Camp,
Yeah,
as a kid?
yeah,
What would you
yeah.
say? What would you say that was the most valuable lesson from that experience?
I think it was the power of community. Like the business was successful, it made money. The way that it started was I was already the person that everybody in the local community would come to ask what we were doing that weekend. Like it would be like everyone would
Uh,
send me the text and be like, "Where are we going? Where are we meeting up? What are we doing?" And I'd be like, "All right, let's go to this park. Let's go here. Like I'll bring the sporting equipment." Like, well, sometimes it was frisbee, sometimes it was football, sometimes it was something else. Um, and it's still to this day something that we carry through into Terra Cafes, like actually having true connection with our, be it customers, users, however you want to phrase it. But I don't even like saying customers because sometimes it's prospective customers, sometimes it's somebody who hasn't bought from us yet. But there's so much value in having an authentic connection that I think it's very hard to attribute and it's hard to empirically calculate what the impact will be. But even from that business, like I didn't have a hard time filling out the summer camp roster. It sold out in a second because I ended up just going out to everybody that I knew that I was already coordinating things with, being like, hey, I'm launching this. There'll be tournaments every 2 weeks. I'm going to teach people how to play the sport on Tuesdays, Thursdays this summer. These are the reservations we have here. The spots open. We got a sponsor. We had a financial sponsor, which was the local Greek grill to get jerseys for everybody. So like, yeah, hands down was like having connection with the community. Like the Greek grill owners were from our high school and they loved, having a connection back to the high school. They just stayed local and getting to know them, getting to know different people within like the parks and rec department and stuff like that. Like we just like
Yeah.
connected dots. And I think that so many great brands start like that, whether that is through physical or digital means. Like the whole Glossier story was just having a strong community of people reading, Emily Weiss's blog every week or what have you, and people felt genuinely connected to her, which was a perfect springboard to launch a new idea or a new business.
I love that. There's so many lessons. I try to remember to ask that question of like, because I think about it myself, but there's so many lessons in people's like first jobs, like as kids. I think that
Yeah.
we can reflect on. What was the idea? If you think about it, was it like an inflection point where you were thinking like, okay, I want to build a super automatic espresso machine. Like, what was there a moment like where you had dinner? What was that like when you came up with the idea?
I think there's kind of like a two-step light bulb. The first was using a pod machine in my office and just like actually being genuinely annoyed with it, like being like, and that sounds rather banal, but that is the reality of like I loved coffee. I wasn't working in the coffee industry, but just as an enthusiast who was learning more and more. And then anytime it was my birthday, people would get me different coffee gear and equipment. So ended up getting, I think it's even like popularized now, but it's been around for ages, which is the siphon coffee, where it almost feels like a little chemistry set when you make it. Like every time somebody wanted to get me a gift, it would be something within the coffee space. But at the office, and then also just like focusing on what was the kind of table stakes offering of how people would actually enjoy this consumable, be it in the home or the office. It was like, okay, this is the only brand people really know. And then so when I went out shopping for a machine that delivered the same level of convenience where you have to push a button, because the reality of it is the vast majority of us don't have the time on a daily basis for every cup to double as baristas and pull a perfect shot and froth the milk, and if you want a latte, cappuccino, flat white, or what have you. And then the other side was, how do we deliver the better quality that people are looking for? So from a pod-based coffee, you're looking at coffee that was ground up to like a year or even a year and a half ago. So it's basically captured within that little capsule within a pneumatic chamber, but still, this is incredibly old coffee. You're very limited by selection. And it's just a lot of waste and a lot of extra material of plastic and aluminum that you don't need in the equation. So you're like, okay, so I don't get to select my own beans. I don't have fresh beans. And I have to introduce other materials into the equation that don't need to be here. So I was looking at these machines because I knew there was a category that existed. And that was the second part. When I went to the actual like retail outlets, and I'm talking like Bed Bath and Beyond, Williams Sonoma, Charlotte Top, all the standard places you'd think to look. And I'm just going through the aisles and I'm looking at what's out there. You're basically looking at 3 or 4 brands. You would think it's like coffee. There are like 5,000 brands. There's 3 or 4 brands that were making these machines. On average, the prices were in the like $2,500 to $4,000 range. And the differences between the machines were completely indiscernible. And I'm looking at this category. At that time, I'm working in electric vehicles and I'm working with the best designers and the best engineers. And then I'm looking at this category that has all the potential of convenience, ease of use, and has the ability to improve the quality. And we basically have like Sega Genesis or Game Boy Color level technology in 2017. It's like, honestly, it's insulting to Game Boy Color. Like, no knock on a Game Boy Color,
Yeah.
but like, that's what we were looking at. And I was like, that's insane. This is a category that affects so many people's lives. And this this specific subsegment of it, of super automatic espresso machines, has the potential to basically replace all of these pod-based systems. But the offering needs to get better than this, because this is not going to adapt to how modern coffee consumers' demands have changed, or frankly, how modern consumers' demands have changed. We saw this on every category, whether it was home appliances, connected fitness, automotive, consumer electronics. I mean, the Nest thermostat, you saw all of these different like connected fitness devices. Everything was just getting better and better in terms of the design, the technology. And then you just had this category that was just sitting on its heels. No innovation, nothing, no modern technology, no modern UI systems, just a terrible user experience. And I was like, I actually think I'm perfectly situated to start this because I've been in connected hardware. I do understand the fundamentals of how to, build a business through my background in finance, having been in a very early stage startup, and then frankly, just a love of design. Like I love beautifully designed products. I love coffee. And that's kind of even why you see with the Terra Cafe products, there's almost like an architectural element to them, is because for me, it was like, why aren't we pulling from the best principles of modern industrial design, interior design, like incorporate that into the product design itself and just build an absolute best in class product for people who love coffee.
When you had the idea, did your like friends and family, is it something that you shared with them and they thought they were supportive, or did they think you were crazy?
50-50, which is perfect. I love 50-50. 50-50 is the best. Like if everyone thinks it's crazy, you might be crazy. If everybody thinks it's great, it's probably already been done and you're probably just haven't figured out who's already doing it. Like when it's 50-50, I really felt like I was like, oh, that's even better, because now I'm like, there's some people that are like, the way that it might come out, the way that they might evoke that they see the opportunity is that they hate their Nespresso. They're like, I hate this thing. And then I would literally start recording them. I was like, can you? And I sometimes I would like play dumb. I'd be like, why do you hate it? Like, what's the hate? Just like, I'm not trying to egg them on. I'm just trying to like get them to articulate a little bit more about what is the actual pain point, what's the frustrating element that's not being solved. And then, the other half of people are just like, like that was always an interesting thing. The point that made them think it was crazy was that they were like, it's coffee. There's so many coffee products. And I was like, totally, totally. I understand when we think of coffee, we also conflate the entire industry. So your mind is not just going Nespresso and Keurig. Your mind is also going Starbucks. It's going Pete's. It's going Caribou. Your brain is just like, oh, there's so many coffee brands. Like even Starbucks at one point tried to build its own espresso machine that was a pod-based system. They spent $60 million on the project and then they scrapped the whole thing, which is also why other friends who worked in startups thought I was crazy, because they were like, hardware is really fucking hard. You might not want to do this. But I was already knee deep in the space. I think also having lived abroad in Germany and like having worked through getting a new product to market, I was like, I think I know what the building blocks are. I don't think it's easy. I have no delusions of how hard this is. But I think that's why there may even be a bigger opportunity here, is that challenge is its own moat in a way.
Yeah, interesting. Um, so when you think about just like a few of the things you have to do first from sort of inception of idea, I imagine you maybe bought some of those other brands. I didn't even know they
Yeah.
exist, because when I was researching, like it was either the pod or the $5,000 Oracle kind of
Yeah.
espresso maker. And
Right.
to your point, I didn't want to be a barista. Um,
Yeah.
and so like, what were just a couple of the first things you have to do when you have that idea, knowing the background you have? I mean, can you build a prototype without like money, or like how do you do it? What do you do next?
Yeah. I mean, I went from saving up everything I had saved in finance, which was not for very long, so it wasn't that much, but it was, a small sum to basically launch my own idea. But I remember going from like, I don't know, having like $100,000 saved to being down to my last $2,000, and being like, okay, like I can't pay for my company, my rent, and my food anymore, so I have to fold. And I was, for 1.5 years, I was eating one meal a day to save as much money as I could for the company. which is great. I was very skinny. I looked fantastic. But that aside,
You were
yeah, it was
intermittent
tough.
fasting before it was the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before it was popular.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, it was incredibly challenging. So no, I think with complex hardware, it's hard to get off the ground with absolutely zero funds. I think things are easier today with a lot of the AI tools that exist, but still, when it comes to complex hardware, just from prototyping, getting samples, to this certain extent that you can, making trips, traveling, to being able to be on site at the facility to see the final assembly process, providing feedback on the CMF, and the colors, materials, finish, and just the overall build quality of the product. Like, it's very hard to do those kind of things remotely or through any sort of leverage tools like AI. Like, there's still a very human element to that whole experience, and that that to me was tricky. But it looked like in reality was a lot of what you said. Like, I bought those $5,000 machines, but I couldn't pay $5,000 for them, so I bought used ones on Facebook Marketplace. I did teardowns. I looked inside. I was like, oh, they're all using the exact same components. Like, there is, all of a sudden it became very demystified. Like, I'm not a mechanical engineer by background, but if you like numbers, it becomes very easy to comprehend how these things work. Like, tolerance stack ups are just, it's like glorified Legos. Like, these are just parts that add up to each other to make a given thing. And you're like, you have sub-assemblies, which are certain, for example, for us, that might be the grinder hopper subassembly or something like that. Like, okay, well, that connects to this, that connects to that. Then you have the flow meter and the pump, the thermoblock or heating element. Like, all of these things are just very understandable. So when you did all the teardowns, you got to see the exploded view of it all. And you're like, oh, I get it. I get how these things are made. But that period where things were really tough, I mean, at least there were a few very tough moments, but one of the earlier days, once I came back to the US, I had two prototypes. I basically just walked the streets of New York. Somebody told me SoHo was popular. I'd never lived in New York. So I went through the streets of SoHo. I just knocked on the doors of all the retail brands, and I just, asked them if they would let me serve coffee to their weekend crowd. You ask 50 people, eventually one of them says yeah. And that's how we initially got the word out on the business. Like, that was just two machines. We ended up, crazily enough, in those days, we ended up getting a partnership with Equinox. So we did a bunch of Equinox events through their various locations. And um, that was the beginning of getting the word out. But even then, like, we were just doing pre-orders. I didn't even have enough money to drop the deposit for the first production run. And I remember the very first production run, they said the MOQ, or the minimum order quantity, was 300 units. I negotiated down to 150. I couldn't buy 300. So I negotiated them down to 150 units. And they said, okay, well, now you have to place a deposit for the first 30% of the purchase order for those 150 units. And I couldn't afford the 30% of the 150 units. And then I remember the manufacturer calling me one night, and he goes, Sahand, I'm confused. I thought Americans have money. It's like not all of us. But yeah, I mean, building up the brand, building the website, getting units, getting samples, prototyping things, like all of that, before you know it, like working with various, agency partners. At that time, I didn't have time for, or I didn't have budget for agencies, just freelancers. Like, before you know it, you're like, okay, like, let me just see what I can, what
Was
money I can give.
was the first website like you doing it, or is it an agency?
It was a buddy of mine. I wrote all the copy, all the visuals. I did the photo shoot. At that time, because I was still in Europe, I remember my buddy who's a web developer was like, I don't understand why all these Americans are obsessed with this thing called Shopify. And I was like, I don't care what you code it in, as long as we can transact with people, I'm good. And he knew WordPress, WooCommerce, so we set up a WooCommerce site. We told, I had an investors list, which were not existing investors. They were just contacts I had made, but I gave them monthly updates on the business every month on the dot since inception, just to hopefully try and get some seed funding or pre-seed funding at the time. And I remember I had announced a date that the website would go live, and the night before, the website looked terrible. And I was like, we are absolutely not launching this. We ended up having to redo the whole thing, but managed to get it live in a week. And then we let people know that we pushed it live for pre-order. And yeah, when I was getting down to the wire, I sent my last investor update. I said, look, here are the pre-orders we've collected thus far. And then we got into an accelerator. That was the first check we got into the business for 100K. And that gave us a fighting chance to, well, yeah, a chance to, fight another day.
I feel like you told me about this when we first met, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you ever go to the big competitors and pitch the idea? Did Was that a
Yeah.
thing, or am I? Because this is what I
Yeah.
remember. Because I
Yeah.
thought you told me, and then like they laughed you out of the room, so to speak, or
Yep.
like what was that like back then?
Yeah. I had a call with the executive team at DeLonghi early on. Which is a fortunate circumstance of being in Europe was like there was just a lot of contacts with various big corporations in Europe, and one of them being DeLonghi. And in my mind, I was like, look, I don't have the money to bootstrap this all the way to mass production and really get this off the ground. I can go through the path of fundraising and all of that stuff, but it's precarious to say the least. Like this was all post Casper implosion. So like the
Hmm.
D2C hype train had kind of already cooled off pretty dramatically. But I remember meeting with them. We had an hour and a half meeting with a few members of their executive team, a few members of the, I think, C-suite and like SVP, VP staff. And I just remember at the end of it, they're like, so basically, you're building a nicer Instagram. And I was like, that's what you got out of this meeting? I'm building a nicer Instagram. And they're like, yeah, we don't get what you're doing. We don't understand like what value there is in this. And I was like, guys, like, I understand they're the $5 billion juggernaut in the room, but the kind of just typical sleepy incumbent, analogy or kind of story, like it couldn't have felt more true. Like that to me was a caricature of the sleepy incumbent. It was so dramatic because one, they weren't genuinely interested in actually learning anything. Two, they were so confident in their positioning that they were like, nobody's going to do anything. And then, three, I think they just completely misrepresented what the conversation was. But, also I'll call it like I didn't want to reveal everything to them because to the extent that they didn't want to work with me to incubate it within their brand, I I felt like I should probably keep some cards close to the vest and not reveal it. But the fact of the matter was they couldn't have been less interested in exploring anything together. So I think they just wanted to know if I had some IP that they could get some information around that then they could incorporate into their products.
Did they already have like a similar functioning device? Because I met somebody who I haven't looked at it online, but they said they have some things just in terms of like being able to use fresh beans like an automatic espresso machine. Do they have one now? And was that after the fact of this meeting?
They had one. They had one. They had something called the Aletta Explorer for $3,000. And it was their like hero product.
Okay.
And it wasn't even an 8-bit display. It was one of these like really bad, the bad blue LCD displays with the white blocks. And it didn't function at all when it froth milked. It just like dribbled out. It was the most disgusting
Oh,
thing. And you're like, this thing is a $3,000 machine, but then you're wondering why doesn't this take off? Like, why is this not performing well? It's like, well, it's obvious. Like, there's nobody nurturing this. There's no innovation in this product. There's nobody that's actually wanting to progress this forward to be of the times. And then I ended up on a sidebar meeting with a lot of their engineers, and the engineers were begging me for a job, and I was like, yeah, like I don't have any money, man. Like, and then I had to ask them one why, and they said because for every engineer, there's five middle managers telling them what they have to do, and they just have no agency or autonomy. So there's no desire to innovate within that organization. And then two, I asked them, what is the salary expectation of what you need? And then he said 800 euros a month. And I was like, 800 euros a month? That's like 900 bucks a month. He goes, yeah. And I was like, you're like a 10-year experienced engineer. You have so many patents under your name. And he goes, yeah, I just want to be at parity with what I have. And I was like, you want to leave so bad, you just would leave just for being at parity. And they were like, yeah.
wow.
And I was like, honestly, man, I have no money. And I think I could probably find that in enough seat cushions. I could probably wrangle that together. But yeah,
Who was the
so
first person you convinced to join you?
the first person was our designer. in Germany. That was the first kind of unofficial hire. So in startups, there's a lot of, the early days is not necessarily, we're not
They need
necessarily
the
setting up
paycheck.
W-2s.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. The yeah, he was our first, like I would say like really full-time person, even if we hadn't necessarily like set everything up officially yet, which says a lot about the organization, just in terms of being like design-led organization. Like I felt like I had disproportionate access to some of the best design minds, and I just was like, I'm in love with what you
How
all
did you have
create.
that? Was it because of where you lived or like school
It was,
or
yeah, it was a function of being in Berlin, and then also like being in Berlin at a startup that was designing beautiful products. And then also, I think
oh,
personally, even though it wasn't my discipline, I was just personally so passionate about it. Like I constantly sought out, learning more. And I felt like there was maybe somewhat of a mutual respect, because I never tried to operate under the auspices of being a designer. I was like, I am not. I'm beyond fascinated by it. And I
yeah.
just love the attention to detail. And I try and layer that intentionality into our products and our brand, and how we listen to our community, how we listen to the design community, how we try and be progressive with our visuals, whether that be the physical product itself, the UI, the website, what have you. Like every touch point needs to feel special and differentiated in a way that showcases us as being a leader in design. But I just wanted to be around them, and I just kept asking
Yeah.
more questions. And then I would ask them like, hey, I'm seeing this trend versus that trend. And all of them would be like, you are like just academically just running through this discipline. I'm like, I want to learn more, and I want to see the world with how they see it, because they would just create these things. And I was like, this is, whether consciously or subconsciously, it affects how we live every day. Like it affects you whether
Yeah.
you know it or not. So why don't we try and build the best possible product, because it's going to enhance anybody who comes in contact with it. It's going to enhance their life. And what better category than coffee, where it is like truly the start of your day.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like this guy might have one foot in, one foot out? It's too early, or did you know he was in from the get-go? You guys just clicked.
I was thinking about the Vinod Khosla interview he was doing, where he was talking about, as you scale, um, it's hard to recreate that nucleus that you have with your first team. And he was specifically talking about the first 7 hires of the organization. And I
Mm,
was weird, because I kind of felt like he was talking to me directly, even though it was an interview. Like, we've hired incredible people. But in the early days, it is very scrappy. Like, you can't pay market salaries.
right.
Like, you're not going to be competitive like that. You have to get people who are deeply passionate about what you're building and like how you're approaching it, and they just love creating. And he was talking about, he's like, those first 7 hires, you feel like you could summit Everest with. You understand, like, it's not going to be a linear path. There's going to be a crevasse here. You're going to have to zig and zag. Sometimes you might have to go down the mountain to get back up it. Like, it's going to be that, meandering path, but you just feel like you can accomplish anything together. And it's like the first 7 people, when you go to or when you're asking this question of like, did I think he had one foot in, one foot out? It's just like, we're all in, like just so intensely all in. And even though I don't work with this guy today in the company, it's still one of the deepest connections. Like that is still, to this day, I could call him tomorrow and be like, hey, like let's work on this project together with TK, and we'll learn it in a heartbeat. He would say, yeah,
Yeah. That's really cool.
yeah.
Um,
Which goes back to the community side too. It's like having like authentic and deep relationships, I think, is a competitive advantage in business.
I think about like I imagine the community you had of users, like to go from your first product to your second. I just remember
Right.
like I don't know if I don't think I provided direct feedback in any way, but it was almost like it was just weird because it was like, oh, like they must have listened to somebody. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
all of the like I've talked to this about someone the other day, like you would never know what went into the second one unless you actually physically use the first one. Like you would have no clue of all the things that were addressed.
Yeah. It is so cool to see the people that had the first one that got the second one, because they're like, you guys changed, like you improved every aspect. And I was like, 1000%. And then going from the second to the third, like now that we have the TKO2 and the Demi, like the reception has been incredible, because we particularly focused on like we love this about the TKO2, which by the way, that's a lot of people that never had that TKO1, so they don't even know the improvements that were
Huh.
made. But like these are the things that like, the TKO2 is a $2,000 product, right? Like it is best in class. We put in all the bells and whistles in there. Like it is orders of magnitude better than the top of the line by anybody else. So like, you have like a $4 or $5,000 Jura. We wanted to blow that out of the water and still be competitive on price. But there are a lot of people that were like, look, when it comes to size, which, to have all the capabilities, it's a bigger machine than the Demi. Demi, true to its name, is about half the volume of the TKO2. Size really matters for a lot of people. So even those who could afford the $2,000 machine, they're like, look, I don't want to dedicate the amount of kitchen countertop real estate to it. And then two, a lot of people were like, I don't need perfectly froth flat whites and cortado. Like I don't mind pouring milk in over top, which is like milk was always one of the biggest failure points for these machines because if you don't rinse the spout or if you don't rinse the milk hose, like those are where, you can do it later, but if you wait long enough, the clogging and, coagulated nature of milk, it depends on also what milks you're using. We'd
Yeah.
have people put like turmeric milks through it. And I'm like, dude, there's so much sediment in that. Like I can just, it's
Turmeric
fine. But like,
milks. That's funny.
yeah. And you're like, all right, so like some collagen milk is just like clogging the thing. Like, I get it, it's trending, but like it is, we're definitely testing the limits of what we can froth here. But a lot of people just like didn't need it. And we're like, okay, well, we can vastly reduce the footprint of the machine. We can still have all the same customization for the black coffees. We can have espresso, we can have drip coffee, we can have Americanos, longos, whatever. You can still have all the strength controls, but we can make this thing way smaller and frankly more affordable with all the same design principles and industrial design language as the V2, but just better suited for frankly a lot of people that live in high density cities. So people in San Francisco,
Yes.
Chicago, New York, they don't, they're doing very well, but they don't have a huge kitchen to dedicate to that space. And we're like, okay, that's really interesting. And the second thing that's really interesting was 48% of our customers with just the TKO2, just the TKO2, 48% of our customers were coming from pod-based machines. So Keurig and Espresso were graduating, getting a TKO2. And we're like, okay, well, that makes the Demi really interesting because it could be a far better offering for a lot of people that love the O2, but don't necessarily need all of those functionalities. That might be a more natural graduation. And maybe they get the Demi and in the future they get the O2. But now you have a few options to choose from for, depending on what your various needs are for your, household.
Interesting. How do you get the feedback that you really value? Is it like just email surveys and things like that, or how do you get it?
It's a lot of email surveys. It's a lot of phone calls. So like actually taking the time, like when people call in to actually ask them questions to understand what their pain points are or what the features are that they would like to have. So there's surveys that we run as well. Anytime we do that, we'll get hundreds, if not thousands of responses. And then we also, I don't know that a lot of people know this because we actually shared this with a few people that came by the office that are just customers that ended up posting these huge reviews that they like love the machine. They didn't even know about this, so they're highly engaged. We have a TK vote page. So if you go to terracafe.com/vote, we have a page that allows you to upvote the new features you want us to work on for the TKO2.
Interesting.
So like we created this whole board and then you can see all the updates we've shipped on one column. In the other column, you have whatever else we're working on that you can prioritize. And we're going to add in a feature as well where you can like submit a ticket. We'd still need to review before I can immediately go into the board just in case there's like profanity or anything that we need to
Yeah.
vet for. But we're going to also have that level of modularity. But any proposed ticket that we get is from customer feedback. So like the Alexa skill
Okay.
that we rolled out a few months ago, I didn't know how many people were going to really care about this. Like we had some of our investors were like, do people really care about connecting it to Alexa? And we're like, it is the biggest ticket by far. And then when we launched it, 87% of people, after we shipped that feature, 87% of people connected it to Alexa of our install, like tens of thousands of machines. And you're
Wow.
like, holy shit, like people really care about this because it's not just Alexa brew me a coffee because obviously you need to go and put your cup underneath the spout. It's like warm up the machine. What's the status of the machine? Like run a rinse cycle. Like you can just have it do the things you need to do. So when you get to it, it's like ready to go like
Yeah.
that. So
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say is what was the most challenging thing that you've been through, lesson learned thus far through your journey with the company?
I think the toughest thing probably thus far is the needle threading of not letting perfect be the enemy of good and perfect be the enemy of done. Like, I think there are a lot of constraints in building connected and complex hardware, and you want to like deliver every element for every person. But I think being one, clear on defining who you're trying to serve, and then two, defining your boundary constraints of like, yes, like we are striving for excellence here, but there are conditions that we are bound by that we have to be mindful of in terms of still having the integrity of delivering an excellent product, but being mindful of the fact that, you know, there are financial constraints, there are, product technological constraints that we have to take into consideration. Has been incredibly challenging, which incorporates all the aspects of the fundraising journey, the life cycle of a product when you go from the kind of adoption cycle from the innovators, early adopters, early majority, having the ability to have the patience to build up the trust and validation of the brand and the product. I think it's super tough. I think it's super tough because you'll find yourself making every day tens, dozens, hundreds of decisions around the product and how you communicate it and how you develop the next thing that can put your business in a very precarious situation. So I think trying to navigate exactly like how we get to market to build up an amazing brand, but also be mindful of that 80/20 has been one of the toughest things. Especially because just business is a multi-iterative game. Like you're not trying to win one round, you're trying to win for the long run.
Yeah.
And so if you do anything that's myopic, if you trade what you want the most for what you want at the moment, like I just want a sales boost now. Just yeah, you can do a pretty sneaky marketing thing that can create a sales boost now, but if it undermines the trust of the customer, you've effectively just foregone the bigger picture of the business. And I think that's, while maybe a little esoteric, like I think that's probably candidly the toughest thing is like getting the 80/20 right.
Yeah. I love that. That totally makes sense. And I can imagine you have to balance like financial expectations with long-term decision making and whatnot. What's one piece of advice? Yeah,
can I
go
give
ahead.
you an example of that actually? Like there can be all these situations where I'm talking about it as it pertains to the product, but when I say it's like dozens, if not hundreds of decisions every day, like let's just say like a marketing campaign. Like there's a lot of um there's a lot of theories around if I want to go and like spread the word about the business. You can do performance marketing, but it's usually if it's the only portion of your diet, it's not really a very healthy, balanced diet. Like you should do some brand storytelling, especially for a new product, especially for a complex product. If you want to drop $60,000 and go buy a dozen bus shelters in Hell's Kitchen, you can do that. It probably isn't going to do that much for your brand. And it might actually feel like you just flushed all that money down the drain. And if you drop 300 or 400 or $500,000 and you do a full subway takeover, you have an out of home campaign with maybe some billboards or truck wraps with maybe some form of a celebrity endorsement that also has an in-person IRL event to showcase a new product and a new feature that you get to draw more attention to the brand in a manner that presents it in the right light. All of a sudden, you can see a massive inflection point that sends you into the stratosphere. But how do you get the 80/20 right on what is a good big swing for the brand? Is that too big of a swing? Is that too big of a risk? What if you take that risk and it could send the company on a rocket ship of success? But what if you don't have the patience to be able to wait for that to happen? What if it doesn't materialize right away? Like those types of like that's just like a little distant. If you're trying to get a store, are you trying to be as bootstrapped and scrappy with how you launch that store to make sure you're being mindful of spend? You have to, especially in this environment. But like, what if you got to truly invest in that first brick and mortar location in a manner in which it really spoke to the brand, what you stood for, the values, the aesthetics, the the location, who you partner with, all of those factors. Like the difference between those two things could be a magnitude of $1 million. But what if the former gets you nothing and the latter gets you everything? But, can you afford to take that swing? And those might be like somewhat hyperbolic examples, but you literally do that every day. There's this feature with the O2 that, I could point to a million different things we had to make decisions on, like, is this worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze here? And you're going to be doing that rinse repeat. I think it's incredibly challenging, but just kind of having equanimity through all of that, trying to have data driven decision making, but also if you're a business operator, you better have an informed gut as well, like understanding that just comes with the territory.
Yeah. Was there a moment where the business was comfortable enough where you could eat two meals a day?
Yeah. 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 We fortunately got there. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting gluttonous. I'm enjoying 3 now. So, but yeah, it's crazy too. Like my friends always tell me, they're like, you're not really good at appreciating how far you've come. Because there's always more things to solve. There's always something else going on. Like that again, it comes with the territory. Um, but it really does feel like I just blinked twice and all of a sudden I'm at the stage at Terra Cafe that I dreamt of when I was just getting, like, I remember pacing around New York, talking with my friends, that, we're doing 1 million, 2 million a month. And I was like, wow, like we had just done 190K that year. And I was like, oh, I think we might be onto something. And then they were telling me they're doing 1 million, 2 million a month. And I was like, what? That's like, those are astronomical numbers. And he was like, oh, I'm dealing with this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh God, who would even care? Like, you're fine. You're at that level. And it's like you blink twice and you're pretty much there. And you're like, I don't really pause to take stock and appreciate how far we've come because there's always something to deal with. And now I'm talking with my other friend who's well above 9 figures in revenue. He's, doing 150 million and he's still dealing with the same stuff. And he's like, Son, I'm going to tell you a little secret. You're still going to keep dealing with the same issues. Like, it's just part of it. Like, it's just the size and the number changes, but you're dealing with the same stuff. And I was like, all right, well then we better learn to lead and operate with equanimity and gratitude because otherwise, like, this is the journey. So you got to enjoy the process.
Yeah. What would you say is the best compliment you ever got when it came to the product?
Oh, I love that question. It was either that this feels unlike anything I've ever seen in the category because I really think we tried hard to stand out from a category that felt entirely commoditized and really do something different, standing out in a meaningful way. Or the alternative that I always appreciated the most was they said if I had to describe it in one word, I would say thoughtful. And I was like, yeah, we thought a lot about this, a lot.
Where did
There's
that come from? Do you
nothing.
remember?
I'm sorry.
Where did the thoughtful compliment come from?
It just came from a customer that we were
Oh,
talking to that was like, if I had to distill it down to one word, and I was like, oh, that's my favorite. That to me means the most. It doesn't, it's also just again very honest in the sense of like it doesn't necessarily mean you always hit the mark and because you won't for everybody. You cannot be everything for everyone. But the amount of discretion and discerning decision making that happened through that journey was I knowing what that looks like in other companies, you're not going to get anything close to what that looked like for us. And that's why we have these things like the TK vote, because it's like we're going to keep trying to make this better.
yeah.
We're going to keep advancing this product. We're going to keep listening to unlike anybody else out there that exists in the TKO2, that exists in the Demi, and that exists in everything else that we're rolling out. So that's probably the most impactful. And it felt the most true to how we operate as a company. Like I have this rule in the company, like no autopilot. Like if you're in like I never get upset if somebody disagrees with me or anybody kind of wants to verbally kind of deliberate or duke it out, so to speak. Because I'm like, you're doing it because you care. If you didn't care, you'd just be like, okay, all right,
Right. Yeah.
sure. And I'm like, that I hate. Why are you doing then why are you even here? Like we're trying to build something new. We're trying to elevate this entire category. And, we play such a big role in people's homes. I want you to care. And that doesn't mean you always have to duke it out. It just means like, I'm not going to ever get upset if that's the case.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's like a personal thing. I mean, it's a big responsibility in a way, right? And if you think
Yeah.
about like even the role that it plays to sort of fuel somebody or help them focus, and yeah, I interview a lot of people, and some of them are like CEOs of 10,000 people companies or 5,000 people or whatever it is, and sometimes I just think to myself, sometimes I ask it, but sometimes I don't. But like, who tells you the truth? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
something I wonder because like the more senior you get, I'm sure even if you hired, another employee who maybe doesn't directly report to you, but it's almost like the higher you get up, the less people are likely to tell you the truth because the
Yeah.
consequences get bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I've been around a few people like that, and then I've just made it very clear up front that that is one thing that I don't tolerate internally. Like I don't want yes men and yes women, and then also it doesn't help me grow or the company grow. You're not doing me any favors by doing that. It's like what's the
Yeah.
joke? The one thing that the Enron and Theranos boards had in common was that they all really got along. They really got
Yeah.
along. Like great, love that.
That's funny.
Yeah, you don't need to placate. Just tell me what you think.
Yeah. What would you say is so far your proudest moment or milestone or accomplishment?
It's funny that I still a lot of times go back to um I go back to the early days a lot, but I will say the first that comes to mind, or the first that came to mind when you said that, there's a few, and I'm trying to decide which would truly be the proudest. But I think that um the materiality of the first freight container of O2s arriving to the US when we opened up the container in our offices in Greenpoint was the biggest moment for me. I felt like that's where the story of the company started. Even though we had been operating for 6 years, um, the O1 was a great product, but it was incredibly limited in what I could bring to market in terms of just where I was at from a capitalization standpoint. It's a great product and it was a great, offering for its price point and what it could do in terms of what we got to market and how it worked as a whole. But the O2 was the start of the story to me. It was fully owned from, tip to tail, however you want to say it, tabula rasa, soup to nuts. Like
Your
I felt like
creativity
we were,
was in it, it sounds like. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's like there's all these goosebump moments along the way. I was just having this conversation yesterday with someone. It's like the creation or like creative process is just the most satisfying to me. It's like the first time you're talking about what you want the product to do, how it should function, what, the specifications, the industrial design inspirations, or just the general design inspirations that you're pulling from. And then you get the first sketches. It's a goosebump moment. It's surreal. Like you're like, you have all these renders, and then you start down selecting. I like these elements, I like these elements. And for what reason? Why? There's a sense of warmth, there's a sense of integration into the home, into a modern contemporary kitchen. Like I like these analog interactions because I think there should still be an analog element, even if we're trying to automate as much as possible. And then you see the first production run, you go to the facility, you see the first assembly line of like, the first units coming off the line, then you get goosebumps again. The first time the first container arrived with the mass production units, I was like, the story's starting now. Like now is our
Yeah.
kind of inflection point for the business. So that would be
I
the biggest that comes to mind.
I remember you did like I don't know if it was like an Instagram live or something like that, but it was right when it was launching, and you seem really proud and people were asking questions. I joined for a while, and um I just felt like he's probably exhausted. That's what I was like watching.
Yeah.
I was like, he's probably gone through to get to this unit, and you had it
Yeah.
next to you. I just thought to myself, like, wow, that's got to be a lot of work. And sometimes, like, you need to, you know, just take a
Take
moment.
stock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Not the best at it, but I'm trying to get better.
yeah. What do
Yeah.
you do? Like, if I were to ask you, like, what's one thing you do for your mental health to take care of yourself, to kind of get balanced? Like, what do you do for yourself now these days?
Sports, music, or the arts. It's one of those three. So the one thing was I always told my friends, if you see me not doing anything athletic, you should be concerned with me, because that's usually the last thing I drop off. But it's usually a sign I'm not taking care of my health at all. So that's the first thing. Um, it's very much, ingrained in me from my upbringing, so it just means a lot to me.
You go to the gym, or what do
To
you do now?
Yeah, going to the
Okay.
gym. I was playing basketball for a while, going to the gym, um, so haven't really found a group to do wrestling with or rowing here,
Yeah,
but
it's tough. It's tougher. Yeah,
um, yeah, played a little bit of tennis too, but just like moving my body, sweating, just basically doing any physical activity for me is just critically important. But yeah, it's usually just gym. Um, and then music for me is huge. It kind of got to this point where I felt like all of my deepest connections were formed over music. And then the arts, I mean, not making as much time for it as I'd like, but kind of recently getting back into just going to galleries, going to exhibitions. Something as I got older, I just appreciated like forming your own taste around it. Like I think a lot of times we don't appreciate like deciding what we like. I think we just kind of like, oh yeah, that's art and that's fine. But like, um, I think when you finally find something that moves you or speaks to you, I think it's a really precious thing. So, doesn't always hit, but I like exploring and experiencing stuff. So,
that's cool.
yeah,
Do you have like a favorite artist or type of music?
Dark Side is my favorite. Probably my favorite album is Sirens Deluxe Edition by Nicholas Jar. But he's the lead singer of the Dark Side as well, which is more of his kind of
Okay.
alternative rock. But very moving music. It's a huge part of like what I like to just go to like record shops or vinyl shops and just listen to,
Oh, cool.
albums. And yeah, so it was actually like when I was in France doing my master's, we had an auditorium and they were like, okay, like all these students are from all over the globe, like put your hat or a note in a hat of like what you want to do with the rest of the students, and we'll read it out and people raise their hand if they want to do it with you. And mine was like go around Paris and go to the different vinyl shops, and there was only one guy of 500 students. I was like, I'll do that with you, and ended up becoming a close friend. It was like just
Oh, that's
bonded over
cool.
music. Yeah.
So not
So
everyone had to do it. It was just sort of pairing people up.
no, it's just
Okay.
yeah, if you felt yeah.
Do you have
Yeah,
kids
man.
yet or no?
No, no.
Is
That's an exciting milestone that I'm, hoping for. But work has been tough to juggle with it, but
Yeah,
I think getting into a better place where that can become a reality.
cool.
I
Do
do
you have
want to
like
just, I'm getting
yeah,
that
yeah.
note on my laptop that it's going to die in a second here. I don't see
Oh
my
yeah, yeah.
charger. So I just wanted to give you a
No
heads up
problem.
on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I should be able to survive for the
Okay.
remainder. Yeah.
Um, I think just like two more questions, we can knock it
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think about sacrifice when it comes to career success?
Wow. That's a great question.
I don't know how to ask it
I
other than
almost
that.
hesitate.
It's a tough one.
What's that?
I try to ask it in different ways to different people, and I had to distill it to almost like open ended. What's your relationship with it? How do you think about it? I wrestle with it. I think most people do.
I I think life is a game of trade-offs. There's only a finite amount of time that you can dedicate towards everything. And we all have to make decisions of where we stack rank our priorities, and then how that showcases between how we make trade-offs, whether or not that's monolithically one thing, or oftentimes more, I would say more often is it's a mixture of things. But um there's always something kind of at the top. Very simply put, I think sacrifice is a big part of it. It's, to me, I just don't think it's remotely possible to not have it be part of this story, regardless of your circumstance. When it comes to profession, or specifically in this instance, I'm thinking about like building a startup or building a company. Like I don't know how to do it without sacrifice. So um, that's not always monetarily. Like if somebody just happens to come from an affluent circumstance, I maybe didn't have what some people have when they start a company. But even then, like the stories about what it means from a time commitment and everything, like I'm also a big believer in not doing half measures. I have a lot of friends that try to have a job separately and, launch a company. And I think you can do that for a period of time, but after a certain amount of time, like the side hustle needs to become the main hustle, or it's always going to get shortchanged. Um, so yeah, I think it plays a big role. I don't know if that's the right answer or the wrong answer. I imagine there's no real right or wrong here, but it's a provocative question.
Yeah, no, I think you answered it well. It's interesting. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. It's just I love to hear how different people view it, especially, I mean, if you're building something like this at this scale, there's got to be, not saying you've missed weddings, but like dinners that you're traveling. There's
Yeah.
inherent sacrifice there. You're speaking Chinese, which means you're traveling to Shenzhen probably to go to factories.
But it's
You
like
know?
even in everything I did, like banking was the same way. I remember one time, senior banker yelled at a junior banker. It wasn't me, but he wanted to go to a wedding, and he said, "Weddings, funerals, these are the things you miss when you're a banker." That's what he said in the
Wow.
bullpen. So, yeah, wasn't under, a cloak or in the shadows. So, yeah, that was what I was around. When I went to work in Berlin, I did German lessons from 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Then I went to work, and then I worked, and then I, worked late, and then I did my German homework, and then like I don't I do believe in the notion of everything in moderation, including moderation. Um, I do think that I very much like subscribed to the book of like grit and work your ass off. Like, if you have goals and you want to realize those goals, then um, they always joke that the most successful strategy is to be born rich. The second is to work really hard. Um, I'm not going to say everything is purely meritocratic, but as somebody that feels very grateful, and I feel like I've accomplished a lot. I I'm very appreciative of what I've accomplished and the success that, my professional career has brought to me. Even if I still have a long way to go. And as you as we said, like I'm not eating one meal anymore. If that's a measure of success, I'm finally back up to three. But I yeah, like I only know that I got here. I feel like yes, there is a mixture of luck involved, but it is, you know, very heavily, I think, the hard work for most of the output of what I've achieved. So
Yeah, no, it makes sense. We talked about Boys in the Boat. Is there another book that you would recommend that's made a big impact on you that you recommend other people read, or will we go back to Boys in the Boat?
I love Boys in the Boat as the one to
Okay.
anchor. I do oftentimes tell people to read the Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. It's just it's a great book, like of just intellectual curiosity. Like he was a OG Rough Rider, but he was you know just a very intellectually curious person, and I love the spirit of curiosity. I think also really important in any professional setting, but especially in startups.
Last or like second to last question. If you're talking to somebody early on in their career, what are two or three general pieces of life/career advice that you would impart on them?
I mean, definitely no autopilot and be curious. Like, don't you have nothing to rinse repeat yet, so don't act like you do. Like, um, be curious, want to learn, want to just get your hands dirty with everything because you'll find out what you don't like or what doesn't resonate with you before you find out what does. My second piece of advice, there's a very powerful difference between should I do this or can I do this? Should I is am I supposed to? Can I means I'm already leaning forward into the task and I would like to take the bull by the horns. I want to take this on. I think knowing the nuance between the difference of I want my eagerness to show about like what I want to do, and I want to unapologetically lean into this because I want to take on the responsibility and I want to learn and I want to grow, as opposed to the reactive. Am I? am I supposed to do this? Should I do this? I think is a really important distinction in terms of the trust that you instill in those around you. Again, going back to the early part of the career, I think
Yeah.
that's maybe a nuanced thing that I would put a spotlight on.
Yeah, I love that. Last question. How do you take your coffee?
Almost always double shot, but I've been doing a lot more drip coffee because I need something to nurse for longer.
Love it.
Black.
Love it, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate you leaning into this, man. It's good to reconnect with you. And
absolutely.
just so proud of what you guys have done. It's just so cool to see it firsthand. So yeah, thanks again for just leaning into this. If there's anything else you can think of, definitely let me know if we missed anything.
Absolutely will do. And yeah, thank you for the time. It's great
Yeah.
catching up and great sharing more of the story.